And yet we still are obsessed with these, with our own, because of the worldview from which we come, we're obsessed with reading these hadiths through this kind of what sometimes people call a hermeneutic of suspicion. We look at these hadiths and we're suspicious of them. These are sexist hadiths. Like the famous hadith that says that a woman was created from a bent rib, and if you try to straighten her out, you'll break her. So you have to enjoy her as she is. If you try to straighten out and breaking her, you'll be divorced from her. People look at this, oh, this is sexist. But why is it that we jump to that conclusion? We should actually just look at the meaning of the hadith first. Because, and the reason I thought about this is because I was, before I got married, I was reading this, Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus book that everyone was telling me I had to read. And what was it saying? It was saying, don't try to solve your wife's problems for her. Don't expect her to be like you. You have to accept her for as she is. Don't expect her to change. You just have to be there for her. And sometimes she's going to do things that don't make sense. You have to accept that this is because men are from Mars and women are from Venus, right? And then I realized when I read this hadith, this is exactly the same message. Here it's talking to men. It's saying, men, and I guarantee you, if you get all the men in this conference in one room, they'll all start talking about how, I wish my wife were more reasonable. Why doesn't she just think like I do? Why doesn't she just see it this way and that? If men sit around like this all the time, they're going to be miserable. And they're going to end up with miserable marriages. Because you're never going to get your spouse to be exactly like you. You're never going to be able to straighten her out to be like you. You have to accept her for the person she is. And then, if you do that, you can have a happy life together. So the reason I thought of this when I was reading this book on Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus, I realized this is the same message in the hadith. But no one had ever, actually there are some scholars like Javed Ahmed Ghamidi have actually interpreted the hadith as such. But when you see on discussion lists, or when Muslims get together, or when there's a conference and some speaker comes and talks about hadith, there's always someone who gets up in the audience and says, but brother, what about the hadith of the crooked rib, and isn't this sexist? Why is it that we always jump on that bandwagon? Why don't we stop and say, maybe the Prophet actually has teachings, has wisdom to offer us, and maybe it's actually talking to men in this case and telling men that they have to change the way that they look at their marriages and their relationships.